Christmas Eve arrived in the frontier town like a quiet judgment. Snow fell without mercy, soft as feathers yet heavy with cold, piling against the wooden buildings and burying the narrow street in white silence. The lamps along the road flickered weakly, their light swallowed by the dark. In the far corner of the town, where the wind seemed crueler, a young woman sat curled against the side of a weather-beaten boarding house, her thin coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Her name was Clara Whitfield, and she had crossed half a world on faith, ink, and a promise written by a man she had never met. Tonight, that promise felt as fragile as the paper it had been written on. Clara's stomach ached with a slow, hollow pain that had become familiar over the past weeks. She had not eaten since the morning before, when the boarding house keeper had pushed a crust of bread toward her and muttered that charity did not come cheap. The coins Clara had brought with her from the east were gone, paid out for train tickets, stage rides, and rooms that were never warm enough. She pressed a hand to her belly and lowered her head. Ashamed of her weakness, ashamed that hope had led her here, Christmas Eve had once meant warmth, candles, and her mother's soft hymns. Now it meant snow melting through her boots and hunger gnawing at her insides. The letter that had brought her west lay folded inside her bag, worn thin from being read too many times. In it, a man named Caleb Harper had written of a modest ranch, honest work, and a life built on respect. He had said he wanted a wife, not a servant, and that Christmas would be brighter with someone to share it. Clara had believed him. She had imagined a firelit cabin and a man waiting at the station with hope in his eyes. But when she arrived 3 days ago, no one had come. She had waited until the platform emptied and the snow fell thicker, each passing hour eroding her courage. Since then, she had asked questions carefully, fearing the answers. Some townsfolk shrugged. Others avoided her eyes. One woman had whispered that men changed their minds out here, where survival came before sentiment. A gust of wind cut through the street, making Clara shiver violently. She drew her knees closer to her chest and closed her eyes, wondering if this was how she would be found in the morning, frozen and forgotten. Exhaustion pressed down on her heavier than fear. Just as her eyelids grew too heavy to fight, footsteps broke the silence, slow and deliberate. Crunching through the snow, a warm glow spilled across the ground. She opened her eyes to see a lantern, then the man holding it. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a worn coat dusted with snow, a hat pulled low over eyes that studied her with quiet intensity. He looked like the land itself, hard-weathered, unyielding, yet something steady lived beneath his stern expression. "Miss," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you shouldn't be out here." "I'll move along," Clara whispered, though she didn't move at all. He crouched slightly, lantern light softening his features. "You hungry?" Her pride flickered, then died. She nodded once. The man rose and extended his gloved hand. "Get up," he said, certainty in every word. "You're coming home." The word struck her like warmth through frozen skin. Home. She searched his face, for pity or deception, and found neither, only resolve. Tears blurred her vision as she placed her trembling hand in his. He helped her stand and guided her down the street toward a waiting wagon pulled by a white horse. Inside, several children huddled beneath blankets, watching her quietly with wide, curious eyes. Snow continued to fall as the lantern swung gently, casting long shadows behind them. The wagon creaked softly as it rolled toward the edge of town. Clara sat wrapped in thick wool, breathing in air that no longer felt quite so cruel. The cowboy walked beside the horse, steady and sure, as if this night held no uncertainty for him at all. When they reached a small ranch, smoke curled from the chimney of a modest cabin. The sight made Clara's chest ache with something dangerously close to hope. Inside, warmth embraced her instantly. A fire crackled in the hearth and the rich smell of stew filled the air. The children were settled at the table, eating eagerly. Clara was given a bowl, her hands shaking as she lifted the spoon. "Easy," the cowboy said gently. "No one's taking it away." At the first bite, tears streamed down her face, not from sadness but relief. After the children were sent to the loft, the cabin grew quiet. The man introduced himself as Jacob. He studied her for a long moment, before speaking again. "The man who wrote you," he said carefully. "My brother. He died last month. Fever took him before he could send word." The truth settled heavily between them. Clara closed her eyes, grief blooming for a future that had never truly existed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "So am I," Jacob replied. Those children were his. Now they're mine. And I couldn't let you freeze out there, not on Christmas Eve. He met her gaze. I can't promise you an easy life, but I can promise you won't be hungry here, and you won't be alone. Clara stood slowly, strength returning where despair had lived. I didn't come west for comfort, she said. I came for a chance. For a home. She lifted her chin. If you'll have me. I'd like to stay. Jacob nodded once deeply. Then welcome home. Outside, snow fell softly, forgiving and clean. Inside the cabin, Clara tucked the children into bed and lay near the fire, warmth surrounding her in body and spirit. Christmas Eve had not ended her story. It had begun it. If this story touched your heart, remember, hope often arrives when we least expect it. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional, life-changing stories that remind us what home truly means.